Skins was like edgy before like it was a thing to try to be edgy. Monty and Winston, this is honestly like the worst queer representation ever. Like, I think Heartstopper is probably one of the most refreshing, reassuring, optimistic pieces of queer content that we've needed for such a long time. Hey everybody, how are we? Hope you're well, hope you're safe, hydrated, well rested, and everything in between. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jord. Nice to meet you. And for those of you, wait, did I say do know me or don't know me? I actually can't remember which round it was. For those of you who do know me, what are you saying? I missed you. Hope you missed me. Tee. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jord, and it's very nice to meet you. Guys, so today I'm going to do a podcast on something different. Now that I'm entering my pop culture boy era, it's time to switch up. So I'm going to do a conversation. I want to have a conversation on basically saying, is Netflix queer enough? Can Netflix ever be queer enough? As a queer person, as a queer man, it's very, very important to me to feel heard and to feel seen. You know, queerness isn't something that's new. Queerness is not something that's fresh. However, it is something which is being broadcasted and presented to a much bigger level than ever before. But I guess the question is, even though it is bigger, is it big enough? Even though it's bigger, is it big enough? I'm going to have a conversation basically about some shows, some examples, thoughts and feelings. Some of the shows that I talk about initially are the ones that I consumed at a younger age while still trying to navigate a queer identity. And to be honest, a lot of these shows weren't specifically Netflix shows, but I discovered these shows because of Netflix. If Netflix wasn't there, I wouldn't have watched these shows. I hope that makes sense. So let's make the distinction very clear. This isn't the first queer representation, because that would be like Glee and Ugly Betty, but I'm talking about the first that was on Netflix. Learn the distinction, not entirely first on Netflix. So if I go back to it, I think my first queer representation that I picked up on that was on Netflix is probably from Skins. Now, God, Skins was such a, I love Skins, right? I feel like Skins, you know those shows that are like classics, right? And you would happily introduce it to somebody because it would still hit. I feel like Skins is one of those shows where like if you didn't watch it at the time, you actually just can't watch it. Do you know what I mean? Like Skins was like edgy before like it was a thing to try to be edgy. It just hit. I wonder what the director's doing now. But like, there's been some amazing people come out of Skins. There's obviously my man Daniel Kaluuya, the guy that plays Tony. He's pretty famous, but I can't. Nicholas Hoult, Dev Patel. He's huge. Skins definitely was like the birth of like a lot of really like amazing UK talent. I think it was also one of those shows that put like Gen Z rep, especially in a British capacity, on the map. But yeah, Skins is the first show that comes to mind. And then if we make it a bit more specific, when I think of Skins, I think of Maxi. Now, I loved Maxi. Maxi was like I loved Maxi, but I don't think I could relate to Maxi. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Maxi was like, he was very timid, he was very sweet, very shy. And I think when I think of examples of Maxi, I think of Maxi's relationship with Anwar, and I think of Maxi's interaction with Tony. Right. So Anwar is Maxi's best friend. Anwar is Muslim. Besides the point, is still very close to Maxi. There's like a really weird episode though where like Anwar just kind of switches up and he feels somewhat uncomfortable having conversations about Maxi being gay or being with men. But I think, obviously I don't want to dispute someone because of their faith. I would never do that. But I think the argument was to Anwar, you drink alcohol, you have sex outside of marriage, and you do drugs, but you can't seem to draw the line at someone liking the same sex. And obviously this was a different time, what, like 2006, 2007? 2006, 2007? Yeah, 2007, 2008. So like a very different time, especially in the UK. Like obviously, like I think at this point within media, we know that gay people and queer people are around, but like we're not at the level where we are now, where like if I was an actor, I would make sure every character I do is extremely gay, you know? But I don't know if that would be the case in 2007, 2008. And I think a lot of people like to think that it showcased like a lot of youth realism before like US television, right? And that interconnects and intertwines with queerness, right? Yeah, and even though I couldn't really relate to Maxie, it was quite nice to see someone who was queer and to see someone who was out there, you know? So I appreciate Netflix for having those shows. Even though like Maxie is like a pretty minor supporting character, it's still there. And I think there's this big debate about the significance or the insignificance of a queer character being a side character, right? Because I think the debate, and also this has changed in the last, like, what, 15, 17 years, but I think the debate was for a long time, why are these queer characters never the main cast, you know? But I think at that moment in time, we were just grateful as queer people to just get any character at all, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, the interaction with Anwar is quite interesting. But I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is rooted in tradition, religion, and that also connects with parents. And there's a really beautiful interaction between Anwar's dad and Maxie, because I think there's always a conversation saying, oh, you must get so many girls. Have you got a girlfriend? And then I think Maxie just comes out and says, oh, I'm gay. And I think this is the best approach you can have when you don't have all the understanding, even though I'm not using that as an excuse in 2025. But Anwar's dad is very much like, oh, I don't really understand it. I don't entirely get it. However, you are my son's best friend and I am not going to treat you any differently. You know, I'm not, as a queer person, I am not asking, especially like, I mean, obviously like my friends and family are different, but for other people, I am not asking for you to understand and to fully get it, because you don't. You don't. Same how I don't understand and get a lot of things, right? But I think just to have mutual respect and to not actively make life more difficult for someone is enough. There's also the interaction with Tony, which is quite interesting. And I feel like, for the most part, this period in time, right, all of the reps with queer people was just so negative. Like, it was never about, like, queer joy. It was always just, like, just dispute. And there's a situation where they go on a trip to Russia, and I can't think of how or why this happens, right? But Tony basically manipulates Maxie. It's low-key sexual assault, if we're being honest. But yeah, convinces Maxie to let them do stuff, right? And Maxie's literally like, that was and I find those things quite uncomfortable. And I get, obviously, assault is an experience for any group, but it felt like in that period of time, it was very focused on that aspect and like a lack of joy, which is why I quite like the queer shows now, because it's about joy and love, you know, and that just wasn't the case like over a decade ago. But yeah, first show that comes to mind is Skins. I don't think Skins is on Netflix anymore, actually. Okay, moving on. So the next one is Pretty Little Liars. Now, I do like Pretty Little Liars. I feel like I wasted a lot of years of my life to find out that the other A was a long lost British twin. That really did squeak me up the wrong way. That really did rub me up the wrong way. That was very distasteful. But yeah, and I really love Shay Mitchell. I think Shay Mitchell is a very, very talented actress. Like, I find for the most part, right, a lot of actors struggle to switch between. But I think Shay Mitchell is one of those people who I think of, and I think she really can go from one extreme to another, because Emily in Pretty Little Liars is so soft, so sweet, so beautiful, so gentle, very deserving of happiness. Like, I love her. If I think about like Peach in You, oh my God, what a bitch. Like, granted, Joe Goldberg is horrible as well, but Peach was just awful. She was horrible. very possessive, very nasty. And I really do applaud Shay Mitchell because she definitely has done the work to train to be a very talented actress. Because I love Shay Mitchell, but I hate her in You because she's just a dickhead. But yeah, Emily was a really interesting character. And again, like, it was all very low key. Obviously, Emily had this interaction with Alison. Alison just played her about, really, didn't really know what she wanted. And it was quite difficult because it kind of gave like, and bear in mind, I feel like I watched Pretty Little Lies about 16, 17, right? So I'm not DL because I'm not like doing anything, but I'm like closeted. Let's go with that. I don't think I feel like DL is when like you like aren't out, but you're just like flapping it everywhere. That wasn't me. It was very frigid. It was very PG. It was very unqueer coded. Like, it wasn't like that at all. But I believe that Emily she's one of the earliest long-running sapphic teen characters on US TV. So like, I feel like there's a bit of a mix and match with this one because like, she's a nice person, she's a nice character, and she always stays nice for the most part. I haven't watched Pretty Little Lies for years, so I may have this wrong, but like, it was quite secretive. Her and Alison were quite secretive, you know, and but I think it just reaches a point as a queer person naturally where you just don't give a fuck. You know, because her and Alison, they do get married, they have children. I haven't watched the new show, but apparently they do get divorced. I don't know if one of the kids is a daughter or something, but they do get divorced, which is fine because divorce is common for any group of people. You don't have to be gay for that to be the case. But yeah, again, I feel like these early stages of this representation, they're quite negative, they're quite pessimistic, you know? And I think, again, like, Emily was a main character out of five main characters, but even still, she wasn't a main. She was a main, but wasn't a main. And I'm thinking at this point, okay, subconsciously, I'm thinking, at what point do we need to get to where we have a main character with a happy story? Because at the moment, it's slacking. Okay, and then I want to move on to 13 Reasons Why. God, I feel old. So 13 Reasons Why came out in 2017. Do you know what? That makes sense because I remember very well using it as my, I remember very much revising for my A-levels and using this to watch in my breaks. 13 Reasons Why. I don't know if 13 Reasons Why should have ever been allowed to be aired because some of the things I've seen in that show, I mean, I probably will rewatch it, right? But some of the things I've seen in that show are just, it's a lot. I think it was very controversial for obvious reasons, which I'm not going to go into because that's not the point. But okay, if we roll it back to queerness, so there's four. There's four characters that I want to talk about. Some brief, some not. So we have Tony. Tony is very good friends with Clay. Tony's an interesting character, comes from a Mexican background, seems to have a pretty decent life, a loving family, very open about being gay, and very minimal shame. Again, I haven't watched this show for a really long time. I did more research on the other characters. But yeah, Tony was, and he's masculine as well, you know? And obviously, like, I'm not like pro-mask or like repping mask because they obviously have it better than most. But like, I think one thing that you don't see a lot with mask characters, especially in 2017, is mask characters, especially men, that embrace queerness. You know, I think Tony was quite refreshing, and I think obviously, like, Tony was a person of color. You know, that was probably one of the. Granted, he's not black, but that must have been one of the first like characters I saw that repped. Yeah, one of the first characters I saw that like repped queer POC. Yeah, and like Tony has friends, you know, he's loved, has a loving family. I think he has boyfriends back and forth. I think Tony was a bit of a dog, to be honest, from what I remember. I remember he dated this black boy. I was, he likes black boys. That's good. But yeah, and then we have Alex. Alex is an interesting one because obviously Alex is bisexual. Alex was in a relationship with Jess originally, then Jess gets with Justin, then Justin goes a bit mad. And yeah, I believe with Alex was really interesting because, and again, because I feel like those shows at that time, right? It was very much like It was like coming out had to always be so dramatic. Coming out had to always be so like excessive, right? And I don't recall Alex having an experience like that. I remember it being like very chill, like very much like I'm dating so and so, you know. And Alex is a likable character. Again, because Alex tries to end his life, right? And I believe after that is probably when he decides to pursue dating men, you know. And again, like it's quite nice to see. It's just really nice and reassuring and refreshing to see someone not give a. And obviously, like you have to back Netflix for that because obviously they've bagged queer characters. So I would say that Alex and Tony are for the most part seen in a relatively optimistic, positive light. But then it goes a bit downhill. Oh God. Do you know, I actually completely forgot about this character, and I think I subconsciously forgot about him because I hated him so much. So then we go on to Monty. Monty's just an awful person, to be honest. Like he is a nice character. He didn't deserve to die, but he just wasn't cute. Monty goes to school with all of them, like Clay, Jess, Hannah. I mean, he's originally just kind of like seen as one of the boys, yeah, like very Jack the Lad, very hypermask, excessively hypermask. He's friends with Bryce. He is killed in season 3 by Alex. Yeah, Bryce is killed by season 3 by Alex, and this is a friend of Monty, obviously. And then Monty basically gets blamed for it. So, trigger warning: sexual assault. Monty assaults Tyler. There really isn't anything more I need to say on that. For those of you who have seen the scene, yeah. That's all. So yeah. But then at that point to us, I don't think even at that point it was kind of seen or perceived as him being gay. I think it was just seen as him being a bit of an asshole, a bit of a dickhead, you know. And it's only when we're introduced to Winston that we kind of understand it. And then because Winston is like very, very adamant to get justice for Monty, because Winston knows that Monty wasn't there when Bryce was killed because Monty and Winston were together. But it's really interesting because in my head I think to myself, I get that he's obviously DL and low key, which he then tells his family, but I just kind of think to myself, how far does your pride need to go? Do you know what I mean? How far does your pride actually need to go? Like, there's being in the closet and then there's just being stupid. And then when we like look at the flashbacks and we watch the interaction between Monty and Winston, this is honestly like the worst queer representation ever. Like, Monty is an awful person. So they meet at a party, they give each other a look. Winston shows Monty his skill set. That is that. Winston then says that it was nice to meet. Monty then beats him up. I feel like at this point this is it. Such bad representation. What the hell? But I think obviously Monty is like so insecure and so in denial. He'll do anything to like not to prevent feeling emasculated, right? So he beats him up in front of all these people. And at this point, I think, Winston, babe, you had your fun. It didn't end very well. Leave it, right? And then we move on, and Winston is taking pictures at a football match, I believe. Monty then approaches him again and starts playing Mr. Nice Guy. And at this point, I'm sorry. DR men are and can be very dangerous, right? But there's levels. If a guy, right, did what Monty did to me, what Monty did to Winston, I would never talk to him again. I've met some real stinkers, right? Like I've never met anyone who would hurt me. Well, I've never met anyone who has hurt me. But like, I don't know. I think that represents Monty really badly. And it also represents Winston really badly. Like, how horny does someone need to be to get with a man who beats them up? And then it leads on to that, doesn't it? So then they sleep together. And then I think shortly after, Monty must have been arrested, right? And then Winston spends so much time during season 4 trying to get justice, trying to save Monty to protect his name, even though he's already dead, right? And then it's quite interesting because, you know, when you see that part where like they interact, Winston tells Monty that he loves him, and then Monty's very much like, you don't know me. But I think as queer people, when we have affection and when we meet someone, we get quite infatuated because it can be quite rare, you know? And I think Monty is just Winston's just a hopeless romantic. He just wants to be loved, but he didn't know Monty, you know? And I think that paints us in quite a negative light because it almost seems that we are quite extreme, and we can be, but so can straight people, you know? I just don't think it really paved the way or made us look particularly light or progressive. Like, it's one of those ones where, like, I don't think it was necessary. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we as queer people, we're aware that people get beaten up for being gay. We're aware that DL men will want to hurt us, you know, when things go south. Like, I get that. I see it. I haven't been through it, but I have friends that have been through it. So yeah, it just wasn't very positive. But I like 13 Reasons Why. I think it's because as a quite depressed teenager, I really liked the tragedy. Do you know what I mean? I really liked something a bit tragic. God, that's messy, isn't it? Let's make it a bit more positive, shall we? I just want to do a special mention to Orange is the New Black. So I've never seen the show, but I know how monumental and how groundbreaking that show was for a lot of lesbians in the community. I've never seen it. I probably should. But again, I feel like it's one of those shows where, like, if you didn't watch it at the time, it doesn't really hit the same. But like, if you lot feel different and feel like I should watch it, please let me know, because I'm in my pop culture era. Okay, let's make it a bit more optimistic, shall we? So, present day. Those shows were all very much in a time where I was trying to establish and further understand my queerness. Right? I wasn't out at that point. I think I may have been. No, I wasn't. Maybe for especially for like the initial seasons of all those shows. Definitely for Skins. Definitely for Pretty Little Liars. 13 Reasons Why I feel like I came out after like a couple of seasons. Guys, my battery is about to die very soon, but it's okay. We're gonna like do some visuals when this dies. But yeah, okay, right. I want to talk about Heartstopper. I think Heartstopper is probably one of the most refreshing, reassuring, optimistic pieces of queer content that we've needed for such a long time. I have never seen a show that has been so groundbreaking. I have never seen a show which has reached the capacity to queer people and outsiders of the community as well as Heartstopper. I've never seen a show with so much influence and so much substance that has been so well received across the globe. Heartstopper was refreshing, you know? And even when we look at the main characters, Nick and Charlie, right? Even when they're struggling to establish and navigate their identity, there's never any direct harm towards each other intentionally. There's always love. There's always reassurance. There's always comfort. There's always support, you know? And I think for a lot of people criticize Heartstopper because it isn't like, it's a bit unrealistic, but I'm not being funny. In this time period, right, where everything is so dark, let me live in cuckoo land. Let me be delusional. Don't be dumb. It's very distasteful. It's very mean. And I loved Heartstopper, you know, and queer friendship as well. I've never seen a show that has been able to get every person in the alphabet. Queer friendship is so important, right? And I think for a lot of people, people sometimes feel threatened by that because it's kind of acknowledging what you are, you know? And times are changing, you know? Like, being friends with queer people as a queer person, I think is important. I think it's necessary. And I just think when you see a show that is so comforting and so warm and just joyful, let queer people have joy. Let queer people go through joy. It doesn't have to be trauma every day. Yes, there's some situations in the film which are quite dark. Charlie's ED, Charlie's horrible relationship with Ben prior, Nick's brother, you know, there are complications, but the core is very joyful and very happy and very refreshing, you know. I'm so grateful to be young and to be alive in a time when Heartstopper's around. It's so important and it's so everlasting, you know. It's going to go in the records as a show that really shaped queerness, you know. And I'm not ready to say goodbye to it, to be honest, but that's for another day. But yeah, okay, so Heartstopper. Another show that I want to talk about is Heartbreak High. Now, I've spoken about this before, so I'm going to keep it brief. Best Gen Z representation I've ever seen. I'm obsessed. I love it. And there's two characters that have very different dynamics, but they're best friends, Quinny and Darren. I've spoken about Darren before. Darren is a black, queer, non-binary person. Adore them, obsessed. It's quite nice watching their relationship progress with Cash, because Cash is never explicitly queer until dating Darren. You know, there's no drama, there's no like mayhem. It's just like, I'm with Darren and what? Very publicly affectionate. And I think that's nice. I don't think you have to come out, you know. It's really, I'm so for just someone being like, oh, I'm dating so-and-so, can I meet them? Like, I don't think I've had that with friends. But like, if a friend was to say to me, oh, Jord, I'm dating so-and-so, love you, to me, I'd be like, yeah, can't wait to meet them. So same if I have a child, I would love for like my kid to just be like, oh, dad, I'm dating this guy. Would you like to meet him? Of course I would. Like, you know, because I think coming out is obviously great. It can be camp if it wants to be, but it doesn't need to be there. Like, it's not essential. It's not part of the Bible. It's not part of the credentials. But yeah, Quinny's really interesting because Quinny's a lesbian, right? And what I liked about her is, again, a beautiful friendship group, very loved and adored. She's autistic, so she finds a lot of situations quite difficult, but again, she has this amazing support system. And it's quite interesting watching her be in a relationship with Sasha, because Sasha just doesn't really get it. Like, Sasha is just quite out of touch. And I think she didn't realize what it would be like to date and to be in a relationship with somebody who is autistic, you know. And obviously that's not necessarily directly affecting queerness, but like it contributes to it, you know? So yeah, big up Heartbreak High. Guys, I'm being real. I would talk for longer, but my camera's going to die and I'm like on a roll. So, is Netflix queer enough? I think in a way it can be. Like, there's a huge range from like Heartstopper, the softness that we have and the purity, to shows like Sex Education that have a bit more complexity. I think there is like a commitment trying to make more diversity, but I don't think it's enough just yet. We're seeing a progress in queer leading roles. Ncuti Gatwa, Kit Connor, Yasmin Finney, Joe Locke, you know. And I think also it's really reassuring that like these shows are leading on to a global reach. You know, like they're leading on to a position where like the world knows them, and it's outside of just queer people. It's not just a queer audience now. It's an audience through and through. That's the beauty of it. We've seen a transition where there's a more of a focus on queer joy, not just queer trauma. You know, for a long time, I think it kind of communicates to you as a queer person, am I only going to get this misfortune, this trauma? Do I actually get to see my own people experience happiness? And that's been a really beautiful shift. But I also think in a way, like, it's not queer enough. A lot of queer shows get cancelled. A lot of queer shows got cancelled. There's also like not that much mask representation, which isn't the end of the world, but it's still something to be considered. I think Netflix is queer enough to brand itself as progressive, but not queer enough to take consistent risks. You know, I'm still advocating for more queerness. A very, very small percent. I'm going to find out the percent and put it in the show notes or put it here. A very small percent of queer shows are on Netflix. And I think Netflix has a responsibility as dedicating to, because queer people, we love Netflix. We love a Netflix show. They have a responsibility to showcase us in a broader scale. And I think also there needs to be more for like people of color, more unabled queer people, more non-binary queer people, stories which don't necessarily just focus on coming out. And also, I would love to see more shows about queer adults. I feel like a lot of queer fiction or queer shows is very focused on teenagers and high school and uni. Great, love it, obsessed. However, I am 26 years old. Please give me a story about a queer person hitting 30 or 40. Because I think it kind of makes you feel, as a queer person, that you feel less valued as you get older, which isn't the case. I've got a lot of life to live, and I need to see characters that are going through the same things as me. Netflix, fix up. And yeah, I think they need to find a way to stop cancelling these shows after one season. And like, these shows, they don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be amazing. They can be real. They can be raw. You know, I like the mix of joy. You can give me trauma, but don't make it all trauma, and don't make it all joy. Just make it real. You know, get queer people in, get queer writers, queer researchers. There's so many shows about queer people which quite clearly were not written by queer people. You know, I'm excited for the future. I think Netflix is doing its bit, and I do notice a definite shift, but it needs to be a wee bit more. Okay, I'm done here. Guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Jord Howard. This is the Winning Side podcast, and I'll see you very soon. Okay, thumbs up.